Great in number, the vast galaxy of Star Wars games far exceeds the bounds of any one genre, with RPG, RTS, FPS, LEGO, and even a fighting game, god-awful as it may be.
4 versus 4.
But it was many moons of Endor ago that the true titles would be granted to fans alike, as the ever-popular Super Nintendo would receive a trilogy of its own, known only as Super Star Wars. But believe you me when I say that these titles are anything but your run-of-the-mill Snes experiences, for within the bounds of their plastic cartridges lies a challenge akin to that of the Jedi trials themselves. Be it the first, second, or third, these games are renowned for their ceaseless challenge. Not to beat a long-dead, almost completely decayed skeletal horse for the zillionth time, but before geniuses took to calling Fallen Order the Dark Souls of Star Wars games, you know, because of its laser swords and monsters, and rolling. These existed as a testament to classics of old, where nothing short of perfection was required and dire stakes were set in place. That said, they're also a tremendous test of willpower, and not to mention patience, but also how much liquor you can stomach on account of getting your ass continually handed to you courtesy of non-existent 16-bit sprites. And because I hate myself far more than any of you adoring onlookers ever could, today I'm gonna talk about these games, and not get pissed. Fancy that. Before I start though, it should be noted that Star Wars games have always had a streak of unpredictability to them. For every gem that should be granted a home within the vaults of the Jedi archives, there's a whole slew of wretched hives of scum and villainy. Why, it wasn't long before the Snes games that fans had to brave the NES Star Wars titles, infuriating little pieces of tie-in media that insult not only casual platforming fans, but also hopeless Star Wars nerds such as yours truly. Like, Luke Skywalker has a red lightsaber in those games. I could write an entire thesis on how that is not only logically incorrect, but also fundamentally incorrect. Don't even get me started on the original Famicom version, what with its Darth Vader that has a knack for turning into different creatures, which is dubious to say the least. I doubt the canonicity of Vader turning into a scorpion, let alone a wampa, though far be it from me to question whatever logic there was when making this game. So yeah, in terms of height, the bar was set pretty low, which is why when these games released, and not only stuck close to the movies, but also played well with pleasing graphics and music, they became instant classics, and are today remembered as some of the finest interactive titles Star Wars has to offer. But in the words of a wise Jedi Master,
Tough this shit is.
And every one of these games completed without any outside assistance should be worn as a badge of honor. Because mark my words, they are tough. On the default difficulty, no less. Yeah, though I'm striving for the authentic experience here, I'm not crazy enough to play any of these on Jedi, nor am I going to spring for easy. Deny me the rank of Master. I don't care.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of Master.
See? You know, I gotta be real, you guys. I'm just happy to be here. We get to hang out whenever we want now. We can play like Mario Kart. We can wear our cool robes and stuff together, which, Mace, you're looking great today, dude. You look awesome. Whoever's taking care of this, phenomenal job. And Yoda, looking green. Did you eat some bad shellfish? No one's laughing at that.
Take a seat.
Obi-Wan, you look great. In fact, speaking of Obi-Wan, guys, he's the one who kind of spilled the tea on everything. Obi-Wan told me this shit kind of sucked, which, oh, jeez, can't believe it, dude. Airing that dirty laundry to a lowly knight like me? It's props, dude. That takes balls. It takes bantha balls, big, pendulous, woolly nuts, man. You're killing it. You look great, too. Everyone loves Obi-Wan, right? Anyway, I'm just glad to be here, guys. So, what's the first thing we're gonna do?
We do not grant you this council. Striking from a hidden base, first up is the aptly named Super Star Wars.
Releasing in late 1992, this is a primarily run-and-gun side-scroller that tells an abbreviated version of the film's story. Unlikely farm boy hero Luke Skywalker discovers his true destiny, and teaming up with a pair of smugglers, the likes of which are none other than Indiana Jones and Sasquatch himself, journeys across the galaxy to rescue a princess and strike a devastating blow against the evil galactic empire. The main focusing point is just blasting the shit out of whatever gets in your way. Each character comes complete with a blaster that can be shot in a bunch of different directions, and you can also pick up bonus items like thermal detonators, which of course lay waste to everything on screen. The blasters themselves can also be upgraded, and in doing so take on various characteristics, such as self-guiding missiles and ricocheting bolts, though the effects can't be stacked, meaning that you have to be strategic in deciding whether or not a stronger, more precise blaster type is worth picking up over an auto-aiming one. A bit of an odd conundrum, I know, having to decide between packing more of a punch or not having to aim, but what makes it really tough is that there are no downgrades, so if for whatever reason you wanted to go from plasma shots back to ion, the only way you'd be able to is by, you guessed it, dying. Which you will anyway, so I guess there's no real point in complaining. The point is, nowhere is safe from carnage. Whether it's the Jawa's very own sandcrawler or smack dab in the middle of bustling Mos Eisley, people gon' die.
And on a planet as hot and drab as this, that's exactly the kind of excitement you need. Thank God for blue milk. Oh yeah. Oh, that is so much better. Oh yeah. This isn't that bad anymore.
You start out only being able to play as Luke, but as things progress, you're steadily granted access to both Han and Chewie. The gameplay is more or less identical, save for the fact that the two start out with flame blasters by default, but tiny details like Chewie roaring and Han striking his signature pose make playing as the two of them great fun. Luke, however, is the most dynamic of the three, as in addition to his blaster, he also wields his father's lightsaber, so graciously provided by old Ben Kenobi here. Really wonder how he came into possession of that. I'm assuming it was like a heartfelt pass-on, kinda like a baton. Surely there was no foul play or animosity at all. Totally peaceful. No horrific burning or immeasurable torture. God, I love Star Wars. It's just so cute, always, all the time. From this point on, switching between the two is as easy as the push of a button, though the trade-offs are plenty, as wielding such an elegant weapon requires you to get up close and personal with enemies that damage you on contact, and unlike blasters, the lightsaber cannot be upgraded, meaning you're stuck with its base damage output. In fact, it would seem that the only enemies here actually affected by the lightsaber are the stormtroopers, which is curious, as the greatest threat that General Imperial Infantry can face would be that of a Jedi Knight, who of course use lightsabers. Meanwhile, this thing hacks through them in like 1 or 2 hits, while it does next to nothing against bounty hunters or droids. I guess Han Solo's old adage about ancient weapons being no match for a good blaster at your side rings true here. Also, I love that the game took time to include a level wherein Luke senselessly slaughters Tusken Raiders as if it's no big deal. Like father, like son, I suppose.
All that's missing is a few younglings, and the entire thing would come full circle. Ooh. Too soon? Nah, not soon enough.
It isn't all run and gun fun, however. Sure, like 95% of the experience is linear side-scrolling, but sprinkled here and there are vehicle stages presented in a panoramic semi-open world setting wherein you maneuver a land speeder or X-Wing. There isn't much to say about these other than the fact that they're surprisingly open despite having such simplistic objectives as destroying a certain number of things. But I'm always down for some Mode 7 fun, and these levels do not disappoint. Like, how amazing would it have been if this had happened in the movie? Luke Skywalker is such a phenomenal pilot. Ground vehicles can't help but take to the skies when he's behind the wheel. Other than that, it's shoot, shoot, shoot. I mean it when I say that standing still is probably the worst thing you can do in this game. Not only do enemies have a knack for spawning out of thin air, but you're also working against a clock, which in some levels is the biggest hazard of all. Thankfully, you can pick up time bonuses, as well as cleverly hidden extra lives, shields, and even health swords. Yeah, they missed out big time by not calling those lifesavers. Either way, you're gonna need all the help you can get, and I know I keep hammering it in rather than just showing you, but this truly is a game so tough, anything can and will kill you. The enemies are cutthroat, the platforming, while thankfully rare, is a recipe for insta-deaths, and just when you think it's safe, and all of the threats on screen are taken care of, they just explode into a million pieces, and any debris that hits you takes off a good chunk of health. Reminds me of that perk from COD that lets you drop a grenade after dying. How do I get one of those? If that isn't ridiculous enough, these bosses are on a whole other level. Sarlacc beasts, mutant womp rats, Ed 209? Yeah, deadass. Ed 209 is aboard the Death Star. All levity aside though, it's actually an Imperial defense droid, as outlined in the manual. Naturally, being a Snes game, a lot of stuff is explained in here, whether it be telling you how the start button works, which, thanks, never would have figured that out, or something as imperative to beating the game as which buttons need to be pressed so you can complete the Death Star's trench run. Yeah, instead of flashing on screen what needs to be done, leave it to the manual instead. And if you're an idiot like me, you were probably left puzzled as to why you just got booted back to the previous stage with a very much intact Death Star. Kudos to the game, however, because that could have been a surefire way to game over. I can see it now. A 16-bit moon of Yavin just hanging out in space. Then boom! Gone like it was never even there. I have a bad feeling about this. If the first Super Star Wars was a 7 on the difficulty meter, its 1993 follow-up, Super Empire Strikes Back, is easily a high 9 bordering on 10. It's a lot of the same gameplay with shooty, jumpy fun, but is kicked into high gear, as not only are there more hazards to face, but enemies are tougher and way bigger than before. You are given absolutely no quarter. It's only mere moments after the first level starts that Luke is being hoarded by these pig dudes and having to play Boulder Dash with these rolling snowballs. That's quite a way to set the stage, but believe me when I say it gets much worse. But what here is done differently? Well, for starters, you can no longer select who you want to play as before starting a level. Instead, scene-appropriate characters are decided beforehand, meaning you're never going to see Chewbacca running around Dagobah, nor is Han Solo ever going to take down an AT-AT on Hoth. Blasters return, along with their respective upgrades, as does the lightsaber for our Buki Luke. There are also character-specific traits, such as tossable charges for Han and a new spin attack for Chewie, but also the ability to block enemies and projectiles as Luke, as well as use different force powers later on. And a few of these abilities are so unbelievably cheap that they almost break certain levels. It's like, oh, you don't want to jump around on these platforms in Cloud City? Fine, you can just hover over them instead. We don't care. This is Super Empire Strikes Back. You'll die anyway. Fuck you. And yeah, the challenge here is just so unbelievably tilted that it makes the first game seem like a cakewalk. For starters, you are almost constantly being swarmed in every which direction, with enemies never ceasing even for a moment. Stormtroopers, bounty hunters, wild animals, everything is thirsty for blood, and it should come as no surprise that you'll be seeing Yoda's mug quite often.
Do or not, there is no try.
I don't need you to tell me that. And geez, the frame rate does not help in the slightest. Chugging along, just dropping inputs like it's nobody's business. Chugga chugga choo, chugga choo, chugga chugga choo, choo, chugga chugga choo. Among the toughest sections are none other than the vehicle levels, which appropriately enough see you in control of a snowspeeder, X-Wing, and even the galaxy's fastest hunk of junk, the Millennium Falcon. It wouldn't be an Empire Strikes Back game without the Battle of Hoth, and you'd best believe when I say it doesn't disappoint. Flying around the snow-laden valley, blasting chicken walkers and tripping AT-ATs, it's super impressive given the hardware it's running on. I mean, sure, this is the same console that gave us Star Fox, but seeing what's at play here and considering what would be delivered just a few years later really makes you appreciate how much of a beast the Snes was. And the cherry on top is, it was all done without the Super FX chip. This Battle of Hoth is on equal ground with Shadows of the Empires and Rogue Squadrons, and it was done like a whole 3 years before the former. Gotta call a spade though. This Millennium Falcon segment makes what happens in the movie seem like a cakewalk. I'd have an easier time navigating through an actual asteroid field blindfolded than I would beating this level without dying. I'm not sure what any of this is either. I've at least ascertained that it's a type of targeting system or radar with colored dots, whether red or green signifying TIE fighters, but how any of it works is beyond me, since getting in the required position to actually see the damn things feels almost as if it happens at random. I often found myself frantically pushing different directions on the D-pad until something came into view, but even then I'd be lucky not to be met with a face full of asteroid. Honest to God, the odds of surviving this is 3,720 to 1, and still it isn't even close to being the toughest flight section in these games, but more on that in due time. But you know what, man, I'm confident that I can do this blindfolded, so right now, for one night only, my buddy Chewie and I are gonna fly through this asteroid field, and I guarantee you it's going to be a piece of cake. Well, goddamn. Again, the bosses are way over the top. Han Solo single-handedly takes on an AT-ST, and Chewbacca blasts the ever-loving hell out of Slave One with his bowcaster alone. It's almost comedic how blown out of proportion these fights are, with such spectacles as giant wampas, probe droids, and swamp monsters. Makes Darth Vader seem like a chump in comparison. And how's this for running out of ideas? Before getting frozen in carbonite, Han actually fights the freezing chamber, and the entire thing explodes. Well, Darth, I guess the process did work. It's just a shame the flesh was instantly charred and seared from Han's bones.
Shit. I am so sorry.
By the way, anyone else smell fried bantha steaks? Speaking of, Vader is quite the formal contender in these games, always waving his saber around like some dainty fencer.
Have at ye, scum! Thou shalt be smote, and thy kingdom conquered.
He's come a long way since his flub at Disney World. Anyway, if you can make do with the utterly bullshit nature of this one, it's easily one of the most fulfilling experiences to beat it. With tons more insta-deaths and unwavering foes, Super Empire is easily the toughest of the three. Which, of course, brings us to the final game. This is where the fun begins. Hitting store shelves in 1994, Super Return of the Jedi caps off the trilogy, wrapping everything up in a nice bow. As such, it reintroduces character selection and makes playable for the first time Princess Leia as well as Wicket the Ewok. This one's probably a 5 on the difficulty meter, and I mean after the last game, they had to rein in the challenge just to keep people from being scared off. Fuck's sake, I'd be surprised if anyone actually beat the first level as a kid, let alone saw the end credits. Again, it's a run and gun, but there's a lot more going on here than even the last game. Levels are huge, almost non-linear, with tons of paths to take, and at least every once in a while, you're bound to lose track of where you are. Matching that, enemies are as vicious as ever, but coupled with trusty power-ups and abilities, getting through from start to finish is a breeze, and never before has 16-bit lightsaber combat been so fluid and satisfying. It's got its moments, sure, but of the 3 games, this is easily the most accessible with how forgiving it is, lending more towards extra lives, what with its collectible tokens that award one-up Super Mario style. That isn't to say it's a total walk in the park though. Trying to take on certain bosses like the Rancor as Luke is close to impossible, as its attack hitbox is so large, you have no choice but to block everything and strike only when absolutely necessary. Yeah, guess it wouldn't be Super Star Wars without a bit of high blood pressure, but the challenge factor here is more on the side of the player, with less insta-death nonsense and enemies that aren't as spongy as before. Knowing who to play as and when is key to succeeding, as each of them, whether Luke, Leia, Han, or Chewie, absolutely obliterate certain bosses and make short work of the various challenges set in place. And while we're on the topic, the bosses are rightfully gigantic with matching health bars, but the air of ridiculousness surrounding them is less so, as instead of bombastic titans, you fight enemies you'd expect, like Jabba the Hutt and the Emperor. Granted, the first one you face is literally a doorbell. Yeah, that's the thing that permits entry to Jabba's palace, and Leia is clobbering it with her staff. As for old Prune Wizard here, he's a bit of a pushover. Like, sure, he's menacing with his lightning bolts and penchant for creating insta-deaths, which is a real pain, but a quick force heal every now and again makes short work of him. Little did we know, this wouldn't be the only time Palpatine would be thwarted by force healing, but that's a whole other can of worms I don't even want to touch with a 12-parsec long pole. Returning also are the vehicle sections. Of course, there's a short land speeder bit that takes place at the very start of the game, but you again pilot the Millennium Falcon in a few different scenarios, as well as a speeder bike when you finally reach Endor. There isn't much to say here, it's just one of those auto-moving corridors where you have to avoid stuff, but it's always fun to smash against scout troopers and watch them blow up. Or you could just be boring and shoot at them, I don't fucking care. The Falcon's a different story though. The first time around it plays as a turret section of sorts, wherein you control one of its main guns and blast TIE fighters, but the second time around is spent flying through the Death Star, first to its core and then away from a fiery explosion. Going in's easy enough, you just shoot whatever gives you trouble and then bomb the reactor, but it's on the way out that the true challenge is revealed. Whatever difficulty this game lacked beforehand is suddenly made up for here as you barrel through tunnels all the while trying not to make contact with the sides. Oh yeah, you also have to boost the entire time, and the Falcon can only take so much before it runs out of shields. Couple that with having to change the ship's angle with about as much precision as you can possibly muster, and you have yourself a goddamn struggle of Parthenon proportions. There isn't really much else I can say about this without going into a full-blown tirade. This section is nigh impossible, and anyone who triumphs over it deserves a pat on the back and a nice, cold beer. But barring that, hanging out with vicious teddy bears and a couple of ghosts is also a good time.